2022 was another great year for Godzilla collectibles. From stylized figures to realistic statues and everything in between, there was certainly no shortage of Godzilla merchandise availability this year. This was a good year for collecting for me as well. I acquired a little over 30 figures this year, all in different shapes, sizes, and colors from many different brands. Putting together a top 10 list was no easy feat. There were so many amazing figures to choose from, but after much consideration and deliberation with myself, I present to you my top 10 figures of 2022. Beginning our list at number 10 is none other than the Mondo Rocom Toys Jet Jaguar. Now, I've already done a full review for this figure, so if you haven't seen that, click the card above for a more in-depth review on it. But, in short, this was sort of a surprise to me. I really wasn't expecting to get my hands on this because Mondo's releases are kind of hard to get, but lo and behold, I did, and I fell in love with this figure right away. It captures the personality of the character so well, and honestly, I think Mondo is giving the traditional Japanese sofubi toy makers a run for their money. Mondo has been putting out some amazing figures with their Godzilla 84 releases, this figure, and other ones that they have planned for 2023 as well. Even though I've had this figure for quite some time now, I still catch myself looking at it while it sits on the display that I have for it. It's just a really great figure that has so much personality. I love how colorful it is, and it just has a great pose and stylized look to it. Now, my number 9 spot is going to be one that kind of surprises a few of you, I think, because of how high up on the list it actually is. I'm talking about the Passion Tank Shin Godzilla. Yep, I'll let it sink in for a moment. I know, including this figure so high up on this list might be blasphemy, but simply put, there were just so many great figures this year, it was really hard to decide. But at the end of the day, I knew this was going to make a top 10, I just didn't really know where, and honestly, it surprised me how high up it actually made it. At the time of this recording, I was actually in the middle of doing a full review for this figure, but things got busy, and I really haven't had the time to finish that review, so expect that in 2023. But without giving you a full review, the Passion Tank Shin Godzilla definitely lives up to the hype. This is a huge figure coming in at about 12 inches tall, just maybe shy of 12 inches tall. The paint application, while simple, is really masterful. I love that sort of metallic paint that's applied throughout the figure, the purple, the silver, the gold. It looks great, and that tail pose is excellent as well. In terms of stylized Shin Godzilla figures and sofubi toys, this is easily one of the best, and I'm very honored to have it in my collection. At number 8, the Marasan 350 series Clear Glitter Mechagodzilla 1974. Try saying that 5 times fast. Aside from their extensive history as a company, Marasan is just one of those brands that just continues to push the envelope for what these toys can be, and this figure really is a great representation of that as well. I was actually lucky enough to meet the current president of Marasan back in May when I went to 5 Points Festival, Mr. Eiji Kamenaga, and he was very nice, graceful guy, and it was just really cool to meet him, sort of surreal. When it comes to this figure, it is everything that I love about designer toys. I've also done a full review on this figure as well, so if you're interested, you could definitely give that a watch as well. But to give you the short rundown of it, it's a 10-inch vinyl Mechagodzilla that's injected with copious amounts of glitter. What more could you possibly want? I don't even think all this footage here does true justice to how shimmery this figure is. Under certain light, this thing is so reflective, and I just love this glitter. It is the most glittery figure that I have in my collection. I've always said I wanted more glitter figures in my collection, and yet I have so few, but this is the one that definitely has the most in it in a single figure. This is far from the first figure that Marasan's done with this sort of thing, like playing with glitter. They do a lot of different characters with these sort of glitter applications in different colors too, which is really cool. But considering I have so many other Mechagodzilla figures too from the Showa era, this is definitely one that stands out from the rest, which is why I really wanted this one too. Needless to say, I'm very happy that I was able to add this one into my collection. Number 7. The Enraku and Saku Godzilla 1973 Lottery figure from Medicom Toy. Again, I do have a full review on this figure as well. So this figure I actually won through a lottery from Medicom Toy itself in the beginning of this year, and I'm so happy I did. This is an amazing figure. The look of Godzilla from 1973's Godzilla vs. Megalon is perhaps my favorite Showa look for Godzilla. It's just really cute, and I think in stylized form, it's even cuter. This is also a pretty big figure too. I think it comes in around 9 inches, but it's very dense. It has a giant head also, but I think it really emphasizes that look of Godzilla from that specific movie as well. The paint, while simple, has this really nice retro aesthetic that really speaks to me because I love sort of retro style toys. And Raku and Saku's style is really unique, and I think he adds this sort of whimsy to every sculpt that he does, and this figure is no exception. This has a great sort of cartoony feel to it, while still maintaining the essence of the original source material. It's very much its own thing, but I don't know. What else can I say? I love it. It's just great. And this is why it is one of my favorite figures of this year. Rounding out our first half of the list, at number 6 is the X Plus Deferil Jet Jaguar. This is the second Jet Jaguar figure on my top 10 list. Now, I love this figure for all the reasons that I do the Mondo one as well, but there's something particularly that I love about the X Plus Deferil style. This chibified version of the character is excellent. It of course has the staple X Plus detailing, but this sort of stylized look coupled with those realistic textures just really is chef's kiss. And the colors on this figure are so vibrant and saturated and really pops among the majority of my figures as well. And I will say that the metallic portions of this figure really make for a photogenic one indeed. The light reflects off of it perfectly, the shadow hits it wonderfully. You could just see here in this footage how great this figure really looks in proper lighting. This figure looks great displayed by itself or with its Godzilla vs. Megalon counterparts that X Plus did this year as well. It's a very versatile figure indeed, and I love that smile that they included with this figure. Another great addition to my collection. Now we're down to my top 5 figures of the year. At number 5, the 1-Up Shin Godzilla. 1-Up kind of came out of nowhere this past year with a random Mechagodzilla Sofubi toy release, and while I did like that one, it didn't really do anything for me until I saw that this company teased their Shin Godzilla figures. I've already done a full review on this one as well, but in short, this is one of my favorite Shin Godzilla figures I've gotten in recent memory. Though it's on the smaller side compared to figures I usually collect, this one has so much style and a great sculpt to it, easily one of my favorite head sculpts I have on any Shin Godzilla figure, and I just sort of love that retro aesthetic that's present in this figure itself, and it really has a great silhouette with a wonderful tail pose as well. Number 4. The X Plus Deferil Godzilla 1973. This is the second Godzilla 1973 on this list. What can I say? X Plus has done it again with another great Deferil release. This figure is everything I love about Deferils. So many details packed into such a small figure, while still maintaining its own style separate from the more realistic releases from X Plus. I also really love the accessories on this particular Rick version, that power pole in the mouth and the tree stump in the left arm. They're great sort of additions to this figure that really changes the look of it depending on how you'd like to display it, and it sort of adds a level of customization. You could kind of switch these around as you please. I've had so much fun with this figure since I've gotten it, between toy photography and filming the review for it as well. The more I spent time with it, the more I fell in love with this figure, so much so that I decided to make it the main character of my Godzilla Christmas special. If you haven't seen that, give that a watch for sure. And now, my top 3 figures of 2022. At number 3, not Godzilla, but instead, the Bandai Fantasy Toys Hedorah. If it wasn't for the other 2 figures that are in the number 1 and 2 spots, this figure actually had a really good chance at being my number 1 for the year. I know that sounds kind of crazy considering that this is my first Hedorah figure in my collection, but I really love this figure a lot. For me, this is my favorite Sofubi toy of the year. Bandai has imparted such a unique style into this rendition of Hedorah that I've never really seen quite captured like this before in any figure. This figure is a great example of how a simple figure can still be so striking. Even though it's made of soft vinyl, the textures are actually quite deep, and the paint really pops on this sculpt. This figure on my display is something that I constantly look at, and I just kind of gravitate to, and I'm so happy that I was able to get my hands on this one. If this is the only Hedorah figure I ever have in my collection, I honestly don't mind. This is easily one of my favorite non-Godzilla figures that I have in my collection, and I'm very happy to have it at my top 3. Number 2. The X Plus Gigantic Deferil Shin Godzilla. This figure takes everything I love about Deferils, as well as the 25cm and 30cm lines of figures from X Plus, and puts it all together for one giant, detailed, chunky mess, and I love this thing. I always appreciate when a company sort of deviates from their traditional figures and does something more experimental, and this figure is a prime example of that. From that perspective, I will say that this is perhaps one of the most unique figures of the year, especially from X Plus, just because it is very much its own thing and there's nothing else quite like it. I love this figure so much that I've included it in at least 3 or 4 videos at this point. It's just really photogenic and fun to shoot because of that. There's so many great angles that you can get from it, whether you're doing photography or videography as well. This figure made waves among collectors, and rightfully so. It sparked a lot of conversation because of how unique and weird it really is, and for that reason, I strongly believe it deserves its number 2 spot. But if there was one figure that could beat out this one, it would have to be, at number 1, you might have already guessed it, the X Plus Gigantic Shin Godzilla re-release. I got into Godzilla collecting around the time that the original Gigantic Shin Godzilla was just coming out, so I was unfamiliar with the brand. I was a little bit intimidated by the price of such a figure and how big it was really, and how I would fit it in my display. And over time, it sold out, and I saw those aftermarket prices. They skyrocketed, to say the least. And because of that, I became convinced I'd never get my hands on one. I came to terms with it, kind of forgot about it, and collected many different figures over time. But I guess everything came full circle, and now it is here in my collection. Because of this storied history and its elusive nature, I think this is easily not just my top figure of 2022, but one of my top figures I've ever had in my collection. Shin Godzilla is not only my favorite rendition of Godzilla, but it is also one of my favorite films I've ever seen in my life. I love everything Shin Godzilla, not just the movie, but of course, the figures, the statues, all this stuff that comes out. You've seen it on the channel. But this figure, wow. It's ultra realistic and it's almost 2 feet tall. I think that kind of sums it up. This is a perfect figure, and this clear re-release is nothing short of stunning. This is actually my 3rd Gigantic I have in my collection, though I do not have the other 2 displayed just because they're so big, so they've been stored away for a couple of years now. But just the sheer size of this figure makes it pure spectacle. You walk into my room where my main display is, and that thing just immediately captures anyone's attention. And because of that size and the level of detail and the excellent pose, this figure can really make anyone into a great photographer. I'm not saying I'm particularly amazing at photography myself. I do love doing it, but shooting this figure has been so much fun so far, and I've only had it for a few days up to the point of this recording. My favorite look of Shin Godzilla is the closed mouth look, so this figure really just hits all the marks for me. You could imagine how excited I was. I really haven't been this excited in a long time for any release. So when this thing came to the door by FedEx, they rang the bell, I ran over and I pulled that box in. Believe me when I say my heart was racing. This was a dream come true and a figure that will forever be close to my heart. Because of all this figure has more than earned its number 1 spot in my top 10 figures of 2022. But before we finish this video, let's take a quick look at some stats in my collecting for this year. Around the beginning of this year marked my first Jet Jaguar figure and also my first Giga Brain figure. Now while this one didn't make the list, I still love it, and it's a really cool little retro style piece. The Deferil Megalon from X Plus marked my first Megalon figure in my collection as well. And while the Bandai Fantasy Toys Hedorah was my first official Hedorah figure, I technically got one before that one, back at 5 Points Festival. This cool little resin sculpt by the artist Resin Blood was a great addition to my collection, and a couple of honorable mentions for some figures as well. And some final figure statistics. I ended this year with 5 Shin Godzillas, 4 Showa Mechagodzillas, 3 Jet Jaguars, and 2 Giegans. Needless to say, I got a lot of different figures this year, and I enjoyed getting every single one of them, and making this video too was a lot of fun as well. Definitely a lot of work, and it might be a little bit after 2022 has ended, so I apologize for that. But were there any figures in my top 10 list that really stuck out to you? What was your favorite figure of the year? If you're new to the channel and you like this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, and taking a look at my other Godzilla figure content on the channel as well. You can also follow me on Instagram at Total Approximation, where I post Godzilla toy photography each week. Lastly, Thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.